So how do we fix this? Well, I have about 6 solutions to offer. So one, we have to act early. Grooming is not a harmless behavior. We don't wait until something more extreme has happened to a child or a victim. Grooming is not harmless, okay? It's the first step, and we have to be able to recognize what that grooming looks like. It's actually the beginning of a crime. Think of it that way. Grooming is the beginning of a crime. And training needs to include law enforcement, schools, and community leaders. Fix number 2, we have to preserve the truth. Even when plea deals occur, the public record should reflect what happened. Redact the victim's name, but tell the story. What happened? How did they gain access? How long has it been going on? Etc. Even when a plea deal happens, a lot of times you'll see them redact a lot of the content because they made a deal behind closed doors. And I understand the Constitution, and I understand that we are all entitled to that as well. But it's not helping us at all. We can expose what happened. We can expose the process of what happened by also protecting at the same time the victimology, right, behind the case. So we can do that. These patterns should also be documented, right? We have to start identifying the patterns. The outcome basically should not erase the behavior. The third fix, systems need to adjust to trauma. That means understanding delayed disclosure. A lot of times they want to ask, well, why did you wait 10 years to report? Why didn't you report right away? I see that everywhere I go. And they want to know, well, if you know something's happening, why didn't you file a report? Well, a lot of times, depending on the age of the victim, the brain, the cerebral cortex, may not have evolved to that stage. You know, and every victim's different. The way one of you may process some sort of trauma that has happened to you could be vastly different than the way the person sitting next to you processes that trauma. But it doesn't mean that the trauma didn't happen, right? A lot of times these victims will never report. They may keep it forever and carry it to the grave with them. And then some may report right away. It really does vary, but I will tell you, the length of when they reported does not mean it did not happen. Does not mean it's not true. We also have to adjust interview expectations when we are interviewing victims and even the offenders. So we have to be able to assess the victimology. Now this is more on the law enforcement therapist side of things. However, I will tell you that we have to adjust what our expectations are with this interview today. We have to take into account the victimology, the age of the victim, the education of the victim, the religion of the victim, the culture of the victim. All of those things matter. We don't know what the outcome could be based on, say, their religion. Maybe their religion says that I have to remain, we're all adults, I have to remain a virgin before I get married. But what if they were raped before they get married? Some cultures actually excommunicate those victims. You're out of our culture now, out of our belief systems, whatever that may be. So we have to take these things into consideration. We also have to think about reducing the re-traumatization of these interviews when we're conducting them. So I gave you an example of that one earlier, but we have to take all of these things into consideration because when we do, this improves both accuracy and protection. So we also, predators also rely on systems not communicating with one another. I have saw for decades how law enforcement, police departments don't communicate with one another, particularly when it comes to local, state, and federal agencies. Federal agencies don't want to communicate with the local agencies and vice versa, right? They become very territorial, and that comes with the territory. That also happens when we're talking about school systems, etc. So ultimately, we have to better communicate. We have to have better information sharing. We have to look at pattern tracking, and we also have to look at cross-agency awarenesses as well. And that can happen. We now have fusion centers that we're actually creating and developing having. I won't get into that in this presentation, but these fusion centers are basically intermediaries, right? To where our fusion centers, we can help. We may have a fusion center set up in Nashville, but the communication with the one in Nashville will communicate with other states, etc. So those are really good for these types of cases. The next one is accountability. When institutions fail to report or act, there has to be consequences. We have to hold people accountable. We can no longer do the slap on the wrist. We have to hold them accountable, and we have to hold them fully accountable. There should be no forgiveness for the trauma that is caused to when a child is sexually abused. There just shouldn't, because the lasting impact on that child is for the rest of their life, okay? It's not something they get over because they went to therapy for a year. That's not how this works. That's not how sexual trauma works. Sexual trauma actually stays with a human being till the day they die. It never leaves. They have triggers, they have memories, they have night terrors, they have depression, anxiety, alcohol, drug abuse, anger, violence. I mean, we could just go down the list all day long when it comes to this. And these predators should also be held accountable to the full extent of the law as well, because that has to be taken into realization, right? The next one is we have to strengthen our rural systems. We have to strengthen our systems to have access to training, shared resources. Again, we have to communicate with one another. We have to be willing to bring in experts. There's now, like police departments, I'll give you a really good example in Columbus, Ohio. I go there quite often because they'll actually bring in experts to actually help them, educate, train. Look at these cases. We're stuck here. Can you help us with our task forces, etc., right? So we have to be able to bring in experts as well to be able to help us. School systems need to do the same. They need to bring in our experts in order to be able to help them. If there's a problem, like there's a problem that we're seeing in our community, and it's coming out, more and more people are talking about it. And with more and more people talking about it, it's raising more awareness that there is a serious problem happening in Blount County. And with that being said, that tells me that predators have already found the system loopholes. They've already found our weak spots, our weak points, and they've basically infiltrated that, right? So ultimately, we have to go in and look at these systems and start shutting it down, regardless of whose feelings it may hurt. And the last one is we have to shift our priorities. We have to look at what matters most here. What matters most? Let me ask you, what matters most? It cannot be the speed of a case. It cannot be the convenience. It cannot be public image. It cannot be protecting one's reputation. The most important thing, the most important priority we have is protecting our children and preventing the next victim. That should be priority. That's the most important thing that we can do. So I will tell you, in closing, predators will always exist. They are not going away. But systems that allow them to operate, they can be fixed. Every missed red flag matters. Every minimized case matters. If the system keeps producing the same outcome, then the system is part of the problem. We have to fix the system because they are also accountable. If they continue to do slaps on the wrist and they continue to turn a blind eye, the system is the problem at this stage. And if the system keeps producing these same outcomes, then it's up to us to put pressure and change the system. Just like this election that's happening, I've never saw so many people run. If that doesn't tell you that change needs to happen, nothing does, right? People want change. And the only way we're gonna have that is by bringing in new people with new perspectives. We don't fix this by asking victims to be stronger, to be smarter, to report more, etc., because that puts the responsibility on the victim. How we fix this is that we hold the predators and the systems accountable. That's how we fix this. And we fix it by making these systems harder to exploit. So I'll close out by saying that predators adapt, basically, and it's time our systems adapt too. All right, thank you.
said why plea deals happen. I don't know about any other things, but in Blount County specific, it's the good old boys network. We'll leave that for another thing. But second, the question is, in the last 3 or 4 years, we've had a rash of this in Blount County in our schools.
Mm-hmm.
I went to school in the 70s and 80s here. I never heard of it happen. Did it just didn't happen then, or it was just never reported, or nobody ever thought what? I mean, why is it all of a sudden? I mean, we had one guy, Dalton, that was in there for 20 years protected, that we're all hearing about in the last 3 or 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Where are these people coming from, and how are they, what makes them tick?
Well, what makes them tick, boy, that's a whole classroom training, isn't it? No, that's okay. I do have a lot of videos though you can go watch for that part, but I'll answer the first part of your question. He asked the question, it's a great question. In the 70s, he really didn't hear much about it. There's several different things that have changed since the 1970s. One, in the 1970s, we were raised to keep secrets, family secrets in. We were raised to not talk about things. It's a family problem. We keep it within the family. We don't hurt the family's reputation, etc., right? And so they would deal with things within the families. And then around the early 1990s, we had the internet really take off, okay? So that's when communities gained access to the internet. So with gaining access to the internet and sharing experiences and stories, we actually began to learn a lot more about sex predators, sex offenders, etc., right?
So they existed, we just didn't know it.
They've walked this earth forever, yes. Sex offenders, sex predators have existed forever. They just didn't begin and they just didn't pop up. And then you asked another really important question. Why are we just seeing it here now? Why has nothing been done? One is to protect reputations. It's what's happening. Two, remember what I said at the very beginning of this presentation? Predators, pedophiles, they're very cliquey. They only hang out with other pedophile friends. I don't want to hang out with a pedophile. If I find out someone's a sex offender or a pedophile, they're no friend of mine. They're out of here, right? I'm cutting them out. There are people that don't. There are people that pedophiles will hang out with other pedophiles, sex offenders hang out with sex offenders because they support one another. They share ideas, they share concerns, they share where the weaknesses, the gaps are, that sort of thing. So when you have them clicking together like that, you're going to start seeing others come into the communities because a sex offender has found the loopholes that work for them. So now let me share it with all of my other friends and let them come into our communities as well. And what they'll end up doing is they'll end up infiltrating systems, the weak systems within religious organizations, within education organizations, within other different organizations, right? And we have to think about wherever those children are, that's the ones they want to infiltrate. That's the ones they want to actually work their way into. And they're going to look for the weak points. And because our community has some major loopholes, let's just say, here in Blount County, they have found those weak points. And so now we're going to start seeing it more and more and more. However, we're also seeing it more and more and more because now victims are starting to speak out. People are coming forward. Social media, the internet again. People are now telling their stories. If you want to get them out of our towns, we have to expose them. They do not want to be exposed. We have to be able to say, this person over here, yes, this person is an offender and I want something done about it, because the last thing they want to do is be held accountable and be exposed.